Our next item is 3F. It's an update on the teacher residency grant programs. This item is being presented by Christina Najarro and Melissa Eller-White, the project director at WestEd. This is an information item. And Ms. Najarro, will you please begin?
Yes, thank you, and good afternoon, Commission members. It's my pleasure to be here today with Commission partner WestEd to present an update to you on the teacher residency grant programs. I'll begin today by highlighting some of the data included in the item, and WestEd will join us later to share findings and recommendations developed from their evaluation work. The 2018 state budget included $75 million for 3 different teacher residency grant program types to support efforts being made to address shortages in special education, STEM, bilingual, and other teacher supply shortage areas. The first section of this report presents data on the teacher residency capacity grant programs. 23 local education agency or LEA-based grantees were provided funds to build collaborative partnerships between the LEA and an institution of higher education, or IHE, that offers a commission-approved teacher preparation program for special ed, STEM, and/or bilingual residents. The data in tables 1 through 3 on page 3 of the item show the grantees are developing 51 total pathways, that 10 partnerships have completed their planning activities, as well as the grant and matching funds spent as of June 2021. It's important to note that capacity grantees have until June of 2026 to encumber grant funds and to complete planning activities. Additionally, it's important to note that staff expects to see many of the 2018 capacity grantees apply for residency implementation grants that were made available by the most recent state budget, since the remaining 2018 residency funds were swept at the onset of the pandemic, and these grantees were never able to apply for implementation grants. The second section of this report makes up the bulk of the item and presents the combined 2020-2021 data for the 38 teacher residency expansion and implementation grant programs. The 2021 academic year was the second year of cohort enrollment for the state-funded programs. Commissioners may notice that during my presentation today, I will only very briefly just touch on many of the tables included in this item in order to allow WestEd a bit more time to share their visualizations and findings on these same data. So tables 4 through 15 show a variety of things: the enrollment and demographic data for year 2 residents, the number of year 2 program completers who began a program in fall of 2020, and the reasons that residents were unable to complete the program by spring of 2021. The ethnic and racial diversity of year 2 resident completers, as compared to the PK and 12 students and teachers statewide. The teacher performance data of year 2 cohort completers, and the grant and matching funds invested in year 2 resident preparation. This brings me to perhaps the most anticipated portion of the agenda, which for the first time provides information to the Commission on the year 1 cohort hiring data. I'll elaborate a bit more on tables 16 through 19, which reflects data on the participants that completed a residency program during the 2019-2020 or cohort 1 academic year, and whether or not they have been hired as a teacher of record in the LEA in which they completed their residency or hired elsewhere in the state. Tables 16 and 17 on pages 11 and 12 provide evidence that one of the intended outcomes of the grant funding is being met, that the vast majority of residency program completers are being prepared as professional educators in the context of their future employer. Of the 89% of year 1 residents who have been hired as classroom teachers, 85% are teaching in the LEA in which they completed their residency program. The next 2 tables show that another intended outcome of the grant funding is also being met. Tables 18 and 19, starting on page 12, show that at least 72% of residency program completers are working in hard to staff schools, and at least 76% are working in schools where 50% or more of the pupils enrolled are eligible for free or reduced price meals. Before handing the presentation over to Melissa Eiler-White and Andrew Brannigan from WestEd, I would like to take a moment to thank the CDE Foundation's California Teacher Residency Lab co-directors, Dr. Jacqueline Ollison and Shari Dickstein-Staub, as well as WestEd for their partnership. The lab has been an invaluable partner in this work as we seek to define and communicate the best practices of the residency model across the state. Similarly, staff has deep appreciation for the detailed work and insightful findings that WestEd is able to provide through their formative evaluation. With that said, I'd like to introduce Melissa, who is a project director with at WestEd, and who will highlight some additional year one hiring data, a bit of a different look at the year two cohort data, as well as findings and recommendations from a recent brief that they published.
Great. Thank you so much, Christina. I'm glad to be here to share findings from our work again this year. I'd turn on my video. Okay, I can start my video now. There we go. We've really valued the partnership with you and your colleagues at the CTC as well. And so I'll get started. I'm joined by Andrew, and we'll turn it over to him partway through the presentation to share some of the findings that he's been working on. So, oh, thank you, Andrew. Okay. So I wanted to just begin, for those of you who are less familiar with teacher residencies, with just a brief overview of what they are. I'll try to go relatively quickly through some of this information because we want to save time for the rest, but we're happy to circle back if needed. But just to make sure we're all sort of grounded in the same context, I wanted to share key components of a residency model that are different from many traditional pre-service programs and intern programs, are that they're operated and developed in a partnership between a local school district and a university or college. They attempt to integrate credentialing coursework with a clinical placement in the classroom of a mentor teacher for a full academic year, and provide residents with financial support, and often require residents to commit to teaching in the district for a specified number of years. There's been research that suggests that high quality residencies are a promising model for addressing teacher shortages, as well as closing the teacher diversity gap. This is because of the intensive district specific classroom experience, as well as a service commitment that can help ensure resident completers remain in high need schools. The state made a major investment in teacher residencies, and our team's goal is to try to support key audiences, including both practitioners and the policy community, to be able to learn from this work in a timely way as the initiative is unfolding. We have two major lines of inquiry that are shown on the slide now. And for today's presentation, we wanted to share a few of the learnings about two of the key questions that we focused on in our year two work that are going to come up on your screen right now. One is who enrolls in is hired from the residency programs. And two is to what extent are programs developing towards sustainability and affordability. I think it's worth underscoring before we begin just a bit of the context that I know we are all familiar with, but just as a reminder that these residency programs launched in a very challenging context. The release of the grant funding in spring of 2019 didn't give a big window for recipients to both design their programs and recruit their first cohort of residents and mentor teachers. And then soon after that was the onset of the pandemic in March of 2020. So these residencies have really been operating in a pretty challenging context from the outset. I'm going to turn over now to Andrew to share about the data we collected and some of the findings, and I'll come back on in a bit.
Thanks, Melissa. So I'm going to be talking about some of the data that we are going to discuss, the CTC data and the WestEd stakeholder survey data. So first, The CTC data that Christina and CTC collected was self-reported and collected from 33 out of 37 partnerships in the summer and fall of 2021. And collected data on 2 cohorts of residents that were designated by each partnership. Generally, cohort 1 residents were those who started training in the 1920 school year, and cohort 2 are those who started in the 2021 school year. And there were 30 programs with residents in cohort 1 and 31 programs with residents in cohort 2. And the second source of data is WestEd's stakeholder survey data. So this was completed in the spring of 2021, and we asked residents and mentors about their program experience, and partners and partnership leads about their programs and program structure. Generally, response rates for our stakeholder surveys were about 70% for residents and mentors, and higher for partnership leads. So we'll start by talking about some high-level findings that Melissa touched on. So first, funded partnerships are supporting the development of a more diverse teaching workforce. And I'll detail this more as we dive into the cohort 1 placement data. Second, stakeholders feel positively about recommending their program. So over 90% of residents, mentor teachers, and partnership team members would recommend their residency program to someone who wants to become a teacher. And that support has increased slightly over time, despite the challenges of the pandemic. Last, when asked about the strengths of the residency programs, residents overwhelmingly cited the clinical experience, support experience through their relationship with their mentor teacher, camaraderie with their cohort, and a sense of community with their placement site. As part of the stakeholder surveys, we collected qualitative data on resident and mentor experiences, and throughout the qualitative data, we saw this support for the clinical experiences of residencies. There's some quotes from a resident and mentor here. I'll call out I noticed that my peers who were not residents do not have the same experience with planning, teaching, and connecting with students and staff members that I did. Something that the resident reported. So turning to the CTC data, we'll now look at who enrolls and who is hired from residency programs. And as Christina mentioned, we've worked with the CTC to support the analysis around the data collected, and we'll be building on the data shared in the agenda by showing some data over time, showing some partnership patterns, and sharing some qualitative findings. So first off, we'll start with who is enrolled in residency partnerships. Then there were 359 reported residents in cohort 2, which was an 11% or 36 resident increase compared to cohort 1. On program size, so this visual shows the size of residency partnerships in cohort 2. You see the majority of partnerships are small. 8 partnerships have fewer than 5 residents, and 22 out of the 31 partnerships that had residents in cohort 2 have fewer than 15 residents. And those patterns are very similar to the residency sizes in cohort 1. Concerning credential program, around a third of residents were in STEM programs, 40% in special education, and a quarter reported being in bilingual programs. These credential programs are consistent over cohorts, over cohort 1 and cohort 2, with a small increase in STEM participation in cohort 2. And next, I want to touch on the hiring among cohort 1 residencies that Christina mentioned. So nearly 90% of residents were reported to have been hired from cohort 1, and 10%, or approximately, or 31 residents were not hired yet. 86% of hired residents were hired in the same LEA. And when we looked at resident race ethnicity, there was no discrepancies at different stages among who was being hired and who's being hired in the same LEA. Partnership patterns around hiring. So the majority of programs had most of their residents hired. 13 of 30 programs had all residents hired. 21 of 30 programs had at least 90% of residents hired. And we plan to learn more about the districts at both ends of the hiring spectrum. Concerning residents being hired in the same LEA, this visual shows the number of partnerships by the percentage of residents that were hired in the same LEA. So we see 22 of the 30 partnerships had all residents hired in the same LEA. And in total, 37 residents were hired, but hired in different LEAs. And 32 of those 37 residents were concentrated in 3 partnerships. And part of the CTC data collection was when residents were hired in different LEAs, they were asked why the transfer in LEAs. And the largest reason reported for changing LEAs is that there was no job opening in the district, or that the district hiring lagged behind the residents' timeline. So it's not, mainly what we saw was not that the resident was looking to leave the LEA, but that the LEA was not offering a position at that time. Lastly, as we mentioned at the top, residency programs are successful in diversifying the teacher workforce. And now, since we have data on placed teachers, we can say that placed residents are more reflective of the student population than teachers in those districts. Specifically, placed teacher residents are more likely to identify as Hispanic, Latinx, and less likely to identify as white as compared to other teachers in the district. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Melissa, who's going to share some findings around sustainability.
Great. All right. Thank you, Andrew. So yeah, I want to dig in now to just share some of the main findings we had and the work that we did around exploring sustainability and affordability in this context. So residency stipends for living expenses are typically the largest line item in residency program budgets. And these financial supports help lower barriers to quality teacher preparation. The upfront resources to design and launch residency partnerships and provide early cohorts of residents with adequate financial support can be substantial. Grant and philanthropic funding can play a critical role in this early phase. Over time, however, LEAs and their IHE partners really need to share the responsibility for resident financial supports and operational costs in exchange for the value that hopefully the residency starts to provide for the LEA, that is providing well-prepared teachers to fill high-need areas. So particularly with that context, that this grant is supported with one-time funds, we wanted to prioritize exploring the degree to which programs are building towards sustainability. So I'll share a few key takeaways from our work. So thanks, Andrew. I think you got a little ahead of me, but that's totally fine. So you guys got a little preview as I was talking about where I was going next. First off, partnerships have consistently indicated that recruitment of residents, particularly residents of color, is their greatest area of need. According to the CTC data, the overall number of residents enrolled in the program has been lower than partnerships had originally projected or expected. And financial barriers have been cited as the biggest challenge to recruitment. In our surveys, we found that a slight majority of residents enrolled reported experiencing financial hardships, at least occasionally. Over half experiencing an inability to pay bills or school expenses, and nearly 30% experiencing food and or housing insecurity. And these issues seem to disproportionately affect residents of color and the reporting on the surveys. Another aspect of this is reallocating district roles, such as substitute teaching and paraprofessional positions to residents can be a cost-neutral way to fulfill LEA needs while also providing residents with income and relevant classroom experience while they're in the programs. And what we found is about 85% of the current residency programs are offering some district employment, but that fewer than half of the residents are reporting participating in those opportunities, and cite lack of time and inconvenient schedules as some of the barriers to taking up those opportunities. I want to move now to just sharing with a little bit more about the program context, prefacing with those challenges around affordability for residents. We want to share a little about how program leads were thinking about grading funding sources to support sustainability and affordability in their programs. For the funding sources along the left-hand side of your screen, we asked leads if their residency program was currently using or if they were making plans to use these different opportunities indicated by the shades of yellow. Or if they were not considering the opportunity, if they weren't sure, this is the blue. So you can see about little over half the leads noted they were using or planning to use discretionary or school district funds. About a third were using or planning to use Title II funds and philanthropic support. And a much smaller proportion reported using or planning to use federal grants, local resources, or Title I funds. We also asked leads if their programs were taking advantage of some of the more IHE-focused strategies aimed at affordability for residents. About a third or more or less were using or considering using strategies around providing residency-specific financial aid packages or tuition reduction, condensing coursework to reduce the time and cost of the program, and planning recruitment cycles to try to align to financial aid deadlines. And then a much smaller portion were working with the IHE to provide work-study jobs integrated with the residency experience. So one thing just to note in terms of all of that, the work that goes into accomplishing that grading that is highlighted on the screen of the opportunities really requires deep collaboration, time, work within LEAs and with IHE partners to position the residency to be able to take advantage of these long-term funding sources. And as we know, everybody's been pretty short on time, and particularly in this last couple of years through the pandemic. So in closing, I just wanted to briefly share the recommendations that we included in our brief. And they're rooted in the challenges we have observed surfacing in the evaluation, and also have drawn from best practices and research in the field. The first is just a set of policy recommendations. It's focused on the role of that state leadership might play in directly supporting the sustainability and affordability of grantee programs. So the first is to work towards building a statewide vision, framework, and coherent support system for residencies that really prioritizes sustainability with an eye towards these funds being one-time funds, noting the importance of really aligning grant making and requirements, data collection, and technical assistance to the vision and framework. To providing residencies with ongoing guidance and technical assistance to make use of non-grant funding sources and existing resources to help sustain and make programs affordable beyond the grant. And 3, provide clear guidance to residencies on the federal and state aid, financial aid that is available to residents and how to support residents to access the aid. And then the second set of recommendations is really also focused on a policy audience, but more geared towards the way in which state leadership might play in directly supporting the sustainability and affordability of grantee programs. And and by creating incentives, policy, support systems that encourage residencies to align program with strategic vision and goals of the district partner, ideally from the start, encouraging programs to engage the right system leaders at the outset of the work or early in the work, encouraging programs to incorporate dedicated support roles responsible for sustainability planning and relationship building, and finally, prioritizing affordability for residents, particularly those from diverse backgrounds and income levels. So that's all I have for today. I know I whipped through that very quickly. I know we're trying to work through the agenda, so we wanted to get through those slides, but I'm happy to go back and dig into anything that you had questions about. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Did CTC staff have any other additions they wanted to do before we move on to public comment? Okay, thank you, Wested. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Andrew. All right, we're going to go ahead and open it up for public comment then. If you guys are tired of me being a recording, you know what to do. Raise your virtual hand if you're on Zoom, or hit *9 if you're on phone, and identify yourself. So, recording secretary, are there any public comments?
Shilpa Ram, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
My name is Shilpa Ram, and I am a senior staff attorney at Public Advocates. Thank you for your presentation. We are delighted that high-quality residencies have received additional funding and greater recognition as vehicles to prepare new teachers and increase retention. I have a few questions regarding the provision of technical assistance to residencies to support with the challenges identified in your presentation. First, has there been consideration of a technical assistance center or hub to which residencies across the state could turn to receive guidance? Second, are there criteria that determine which residencies receive TA? We'd like to understand which programs are receiving TA and from whom. Third, has there been consideration of agreed upon standards for TA that apply across all residencies? Even if the provider and method of delivery are different, is there or could there be a minimum threshold of TA that could be assured for all residencies? And finally, one of the policy recommendations on page 13 of Wested's report refers to a, quote, consistent vision for teacher residency program sustainability with technical assistance, end quote. Could you share your understanding of the vision for providing TA to residencies, especially with respect to strengthening the residency experience for candidates of color? Is a more comprehensive plan for providing TA under consideration? Thank you for the opportunity to comment, and to Wested and the Commission for your investment in growing and strengthening teacher residencies across the state.
There are no additional requests for public comment.
Okay, with that, I'll open it up to commissioners. I will move to Chair Sloan as our first respondent or commenter.
I was actually wondering if staff might answer the questions that Shilpa Ram just posed. I know there were quite a few of them, but whichever ones you got.
Yeah, I think in general, good umbrella of technical assistance. They're great questions. I had similar.
Yeah, so with technical assistance, there are two bits there. We are definitely working with the lab and Wested on this very point. We have a coalition of technical assistance providers that are meeting, and we are creating resources for all of our current and very soon to be, future grantees that we're going to get with the 2021 funds for the different types of supports that are available to people, to programs. We have definite partnerships with the lab where they are providing one-on-one coaching for those interested in applying for new grants. We partner with NCTR and Trellis, who are actively supporting several of our current grantees. There is a little bit of a limitation with technical assistance with the different grant types. So with the capacity grants, grantees can write in technical support into their applications and use grant funds to pay for that assistance. When it comes to implementation and expansion grants, however, they the intention of those funds is really to be passed on to the residents themselves. So technical assistance is not something that grant funds can really be spent on with those two grant types. So this is, something that Melissa is kind of spearheading with some of her colleagues in West Ed to see if we can put another coalition together to try to get some funding for investing in that statewide system of technical assistance support.
That's right. I mean, I think if I remember, the grant program from the state did not come with funding specifically for technical assistance by CTC or anyone else, right?
Correct.
Yep. Chair Sloan, do you have any follow-up questions to that?
No, not to that one. I had a couple of clarifying questions in your presentation, Melissa and Andrew, and my apologies if I missed it. With respect to one of the slides, or some of the slides where you were surveying the program leads, could you just help me understand who the program leads are and where do they come from typically?
Yeah, great, thank you. So the program leads are the people who have identified themselves to answer questions on behalf of the partnership. And they almost exclusively are at on the LEA side.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I was curious about that because the one slide that you had about whether the programs were thinking about offering higher education type packages, and I was struck by how many questions were we don't know, and I didn't know whether that was because they're not quite there yet, or if there's something with the partnership that might need to be addressed.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's hard to know how to interpret. We don't know. Ideally, the residencies are situated in a deep partnership between the LEA and the IHE. And so they're working collaboratively towards these strategies. But, to what extent, are those collaborations happening and those conversations about sustainability, I think, and it's an open question, particularly with knowing how disruptive the last couple of years have been.
Mm-hmm. And one last question for the moment, the slide that shows the type of funding that the other funding that people are using, I was pleased to see how much categorical funding was going. In other words, funding that school district funding that to me seems more permanent than, for instance, philanthropic funding, obviously, or other sources. And I just wondered what you think about that, you and Christina and others, for the sustainability work.
Christina, would you like to take that first?
Non-categorical funding, sorry, I should say.
Yes, sure. Yeah, yes, I feel I share that same glimmer of hope that's what that speaks to. Just to kind of add to that, we are writing into the RFAs for the 2021 grant opportunities some more questions and providing some more resources for folks on sustainability. This was new to everybody in 2018. So taking that into account, taking just what's been going on in the world for the past 2 years, there's been a lot of learning that is really helping us to pinpoint what type of financially sustainable models are going to be, frankly, a little bit easier to implement than others, and and really that programs can. LPI has provided a lot of data on what programs can do to make district funds really invest in that work.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. I think this goes to Melissa for one of the policy recommendations. I think I remember there was a slide that said the grantees needed help with recruitment. And it was interesting because that was the original theme yesterday when we started the meeting, was teacher shortage in the pipeline. And so can you share a little bit about their challenges around recruitment and or what some of those solutions might be in this next round of funding? And so that second part might go to Christina. I don't know.
Yeah. Happy to. I mean, I'll say, we have the data that we've collected to tell us about the challenges. And so we don't have a perfect view into everything that's going on in the ground. But what we do know is that, yes, there have been sort of lower than hoped for recruitment numbers, that the partnership team members responding to surveys really consistently have named that as a challenging area, and that affordability comes up on the top of the list in the recruitment. I think another aspect of it is reaching residents and doing the work to engage those who might not be familiar with residency and understand what it means for them and if it's a good option for them. That's sort of that may be involving new processes, new outreach, new communications that programs may still be working on. But I invite any others to weigh in here too.
I was just going to take up that second part of the question. Two things. First, when the 2018 grantees wrote their original proposals and kind of tried to project what type of employment opportunities on top of residency, might be interesting to to potential residents, we didn't have all the information that we have now, and so we are understanding a little bit more about the types of placements that people are looking for. We also didn't see a lot of folks who wove in the idea of that the model can be 50% in the mentor teacher's classroom and 50% in a different role within the district. We are seeing people who are in this current moment that we're in really interested in figuring out how to employ people as paraeducators and substitutes who are enrolled as residents. And then the final piece that's new with the 2021 legislation that we're really excited about is the ability to weave different types of funding to support our residents. So, the California Golden State Teacher Grants, we're really advertising those opportunities to folks, that there are more sources of money to make that year a little bit more affordable for everyone.
Commissioner Heredia and then Chair Sloan.
Yes, thank you for this presentation to the staff and to West Ed. This is exciting, but yet still a lot of questions. So my first question has to do with, the program leads. So am I right in understanding that the program leads is someone at an LEA? And that person is designated. So the superintendent has to identify perhaps someone who will take the lead or be the spokesperson for the program. Is that correct? Oh, okay. I just see her shaking her head. Okay. All right. Just wanted to make sure, because every time I think of these things, I'm thinking behind the scenes, what cost and staff time and everything right now. So, which is exciting, but which could lead to the fact that, superintendents will say, hey, we just don't have anybody with the capacity to do this. So my follow-up question on that is, do districts collaborate? Like, for example, can two neighboring districts say, we're going to share the cost of training, 10 teachers or something, and we're going to share the cost? Has that happened? Has that been the experience in the last few years?
We do have several consortia, and we are expecting to see, the newer grant funding also have consortiums who are interested in applying.
Okay, because that, to me, that seems like a way that would slightly minimize, people's panic about where is this money going to come from, who's going to be the lead person. I mean, it just is it's lost a lot of personnel time behind the scenes. And then finally, I was interested in the comment on the slide that talked about the candidates in this program, that they don't always take advantage of the district employment opportunities. And so could you speak to that a little bit about, that was surprising to me, because we're trying to find monies for them we're trying to find jobs for them. We're trying to make sure that they stay employed. Although understanding that they have to, they have to be in school, they have to work, they have childcare, they have all of these things. But I'm just wondering if the employment opportunities, do they view the employment opportunities such as it's just over and above? I mean, it's another burden, or it's not related to what I'm doing, so it's not, not my best interest. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I can share a little, just to say that the insight that we're able to glean from the surveys that we did, which is just by definition going to be limited, but what we understand from some of the open-ended comments back on the surveys to help explain why they're not taking it, residents might not be taking advantage of the employment opportunities. It was, as you just sort of suggested might be the case, is lack of time and inconvenient schedules.
Okay.
And I mean, I think it's good to know it's for residents being full-time, a full year, half-time in the classroom at least, and taking coursework on time of that, they're short on time. And so getting those schedules to align is probably a lot of the challenge. Yeah.
Which makes sense. But then, it just highlights the need for this financial support, maybe more so than employment opportunities. And so I think that's something that I hadn't really thought about, but thank you. Your slides brought that a little more, to my attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Sloan, and then Commissioner White-Smith.
Quick comment on the financial aid and the fact that, as Christina was saying, we can combine different sources of funding to fund the candidates. This is an ideal thing for our career counselors within our new up and coming career counselors within CTC. One of the things I have mentioned before here is that there are many different places where financial aid can come for potential educators, and every program I know of has different places where they figure it out and find it and present it, and they all present it differently, and it's just difficult to navigate for candidates. I wish we had a central place in the state where all potential candidates could go and say, I want to be a teacher. What money is out there? What kind of a package is out there? Likewise, programs, the other part of the technical assistance that I know staff have thought about all of these things anyway. I am just putting it out there. But if programs knew where all the funds were and it was easy in reach and they could put together packages too for candidates. Then of course, the final thing being the recruitment piece. This is obviously a perfect place for the CTC with the career counselors to help with that.
Thank you. Kimberly White-Smith. Commissioner White-Smith.
Hi. So my question is, do we have any data that disaggregates by the type of IHE? And the reason I'm asking is because, I represent the independent not-for-profit colleges and universities. And the feedback that I'm getting from our sector is that the residency programs is kind of disproportionately impact us in a way that we tend to not participate. It might be because of the cost of education coming to privates, but I also think in terms of us actually credentialing about 50% of the teachers in the state of California as a sector, but also drilling down specifically to privates like my own, 55% of our students identify as Latinx. About 40% of our students are first generation. And because we have smaller classrooms, our environments are different, we tend to have students that basically choose a private education over a public, larger institution. And so just wondering if any of the data speaks to that, and if so, perhaps we could kind of brainstorm ways in which we can rethink these in ways that would also benefit both publics and privates.
We do have the data on where our residents are enrolled for their teacher preparation programs. But we, at this point, have not been looking at data on, as much on the IHE side except for basic program completion requirements. Have they been recommended for a clear? Have they completed all their coursework? Have they completed their TPA? So that's definitely something that we can look into using the roster information that we have. Melissa, do you have any additional information from IHEs?
I only in the sense that we know the IHE partner, so we can understand patterns. I don't have a number in my head of the number of currently funded privates, but we certainly have access to that because we know who the partners are in all cases.
Thank you. It's just that I know that we tend to, our LEAs tend to want to recruit more interns from us. And that seems to be more appealing with regards to our sector. So trying to think the way that residencies could work for us as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I see Commissioner Brown as we start to wrap up this information item.
Thank you. I was looking at the grant in terms of the funds and the proportion of funding spent on different aspects of this program. And I wondered if there were any guidelines or requirements, because the proportion of the LEA and IHE personnel stipends compared to the amount of mentor teacher stipends and release time is quite something. And I was just thinking that if what the residencies were, the residents were describing as one of the best parts of their program is working with the mentor teacher, I was wondering if they were supported enough in that way. Was I clear on my question? Are there guidelines or requirements for the proportion of funds spent?
No, there are no guidelines or requirements. When applicants write their proposals, they can split up the $20,000 per resident in any of the categories listed there as they see fits their local need the best.
Yeah. Great question, Commissioner Brown. So it sounds like a big theme as we wrap this up is technical assistance and maybe some technical assistance around financial allocation in support of the programs, and to look at the balance of our institutions of higher ed and demographics. Without seeing any other hands, I'm going to go ahead and come to a close on this, as it was an information item only, and we just have a few more things to do today. So I think I'll just thank Ms. Naharro and thank WestEd and Andrew and Melissa for joining us today, and for the data and the partnership and everything that you do with CTC and WestEd. So thank you all very much. And we'll move on to 3G.
Thank you.
Okay, this might be my last item. I'm not sure. So you guys hold on tight now here. Our last item is 3G, update on the 2021-22 state funded grant programs. And this is also an information item. Dr. Mendoza will be presenting. Dr. Mendoza, will you please begin?
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Committee Chair Martinez, and good afternoon, Commission members. I will make this very sweet and short. And just to give you a brief update on the requests for applications that are soon coming for the 2021-22 budget year and grants that we will be administering beginning this year. In the agenda item, you will see 4 different tables, one for each of the grant opportunities we have. And I wanted to just make 2 points with this particular agenda item. The first point is that all of these potential release dates for RFAs and due dates for RFAs are the anticipated due dates, and we are very much confident that we are online to meet nearly all of those dates. And secondly, what I really want to bring to light is that unlike previous grant opportunities, like in 2018 with teacher residency and others, we anticipate many different opportunities for LEAs to apply for these $350 million for teacher residency, $125 million for classified. We anticipate multiple release dates and due dates for our requests for applications. If you remember back to 2018, I can barely remember back to yesterday, but we had 1 release of an RFA, and we were gearing up to release a second, and that was with just $75 million. So we are very confident that we're going to have, we're going to release RFAs until the money is done, is where we're going with this. So we just wanted to assure our LEA friends and our IHE friends in the field that we know things are crazy, and we are hoping that there will be multiple opportunities. So you will see the anticipated release dates for teacher residency on table 1 on page 3 of the agenda item. And what we did is we forecasted this current fiscal year and next fiscal year. That doesn't mean we're stopping. We will stop when the monies have been awarded. On page 4, you will see the table that outlines the release dates for the RFAs for classified. Classified is one of our, in addition to teacher residency, is one of our very popular and garners a lot of interest from the field. And again, there we have $125 million to award. On page 5, you'll see the table 3. This is for our computer science supplementary authorization grant program. We haven't forecasted out days yet for additional RFAs because as this is a new grant, we're not sure what the interest will be in initial rounds. But again, we assure the field that if there are funds to get out the door, we will do that for everyone. And then lastly, for our RHE friends, our dyslexia grants for preparation programs on page 6, the table labeled table 4 has the initial RFA release date and due dates for those particular grants. So we thank you for everyone's interest. We're so excited to have movement on this, and just know commission staff will be reading a lot of grant proposals this spring, and we're very excited to be doing so. So with that, I thank you for your time, and I'm here for questions.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Mendoza. It is an amazing opportunity and role and job that you all have with really this epic kind of funding that CTC and teacher education programs have received. So congratulations as well. But I know that it's a very long road and appreciate your flexibility in allocating the funds. I saw that Commissioner Heredia had her hand up, and we have to go to public comment first, and then I will go back to the commissioners. So recording secretary, do we have any public comments? And if we do, folks who have public comments, please hit *9 on your telephone or raise your virtual hand on Zoom.
Kelly Delaney, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Hi, thank you. I'm an associate professor at Notre Dame Dana Murray University, and I've been working with a local LEA on possibly applying for one of these grants. And having neither one of us have done this before. And so I'm wondering if the dates that you're talking about as far as release, that's releasing the application, or is that releasing information? I'm wondering when what date we can actually start putting things together, because I'm working in a support role to help the LEA with this process.
CTC staff, do you guys have an answer?
So I apologize. My internet went out, of course, all day long. It's been on. Can someone tell me which grant opportunity she was asking for? Was it teacher residency?
She didn't say.
Okay, well, I can say that you can start now working on that partnership with the local LEA. For teacher residency, table 1 on page 3 notes the anticipated release dates of the requests for applications and the anticipated due dates for those particular releases. I can say that the capacity grant for teacher residency is actually due on Monday, February 14th, Valentine's Day. And very soon we will be releasing the first of the other 2 implementation grants. So we would be releasing teacher residency expansion grant coming out very soon. There is a quick turnaround for the expansion grant because we believe that we have current grantees who are ready to go for their next one. But following very quickly on the heels of the release for expansion grant will be another release for the RFA, that in case people didn't make the first cutoff, then they have an opportunity right away to continue to address their proposals. So,
So Dr. Mendoza, what would be the best place for the public to go to see these dates? To the CTC website?
Currently, we wanted to share with you all first. And so in this particular agenda item are the dates.
Okay.
And then following that, we will start to advertise them on our website, correct?
Okay. So the public be reassured, especially our person who just called in, that the very specific dates will come out.
Indeed.
Yep. Okay. And then other public comments, recording secretary.
Nothing else has come in.
Okay.
That's the end of our public comments.
Okay. So with that, I will now close the public comment period and turn to the commissioners for a discussion. And I'm just going to check in with Commissioner Heredia. Did you have your hand up or was that just, okay. All right. So I'm going to move to Chair Sloan.
Okay, this is very quick and it's similar to what the other person just asked. And that is, this table is great. The RFA release dates are great. Can we have a dedicated, I know we have a dedicated page on under program sponsors for grant funded programs. If we, I'm sure you all are thinking about designing a page too for the distribution of these grants and for potential grantees to go and get this. And what made me think about this is the RFA, the request for applications, could be available right now for anybody, right, who is interested in seeing the information, the kinds of things they had to pull together, whether they submitted it in November of 2022 or April of 2023. Is that right, Cara?
Once the RFAs are released, it will be the same RFA for all of the grant competitions. In other words, the teacher residency expansion grant RFA will be the same one for each of the days that we're anticipating releasing and having due dates for teacher residency expansion. And the same thing for classified. So yes, as soon as they're released, which that's part of the work we're working on right now, just finalizing the RFA. Once they're released, then people can start looking at them and start doing their planning.
Okay, good. So like the November 2nd, 2021 teacher residency capacity RFA is complete. So that could be accessed.
You betcha. Yes.
Okay. And yeah, so that's just what I meant, as soon as they are. And then if there was a clear place on the CTC website for people to go and get all of the information at once, that would be spectacular too.
Indeed. Thank you.
And just a quick follow-up, and will you guys be doing the office hours, any open sessions on these grant applications to be able to help folks who have not done it in the past?
We shall see. We do have our Christina in the previous agenda item mentioned our friends at the lab.
Right.
And they have been very supportive with our LEAs and our IEG partners to be thought partners around responses to the request for application. It's challenging with our limited staff. However, come July, if all goes well in the budget, as we saw yesterday, we intend to have a lot of outreach and technical assistance and office hours for our friends in the field. Yes.
Thank you. And I'm glad you can depend on some partners as well. Any other additional questions or comments before we close this item? Okay. This is an information item, so no actions needed. Thank you, Dr. Mendoza. And you guys always just enjoy when you hear me say these words, having no additional items. I adjourn the Educator Preparation Committee.
Oh, Commissioner Martinez, you bring such joy.
That's right.
And I commend you once again on your stamina. Well done. All right, next is the Professional Practices Committee. Commissioner Hartwig, will you please convene the committee?
Yes, good afternoon. I now convene the Professional Practices Committee. The committee has one item today. We will announce when the public comment period is open following the presentation of the agenda item. Members of the public who wish to comment will be asked to notify the meeting moderator in the following ways. Individuals who joined the meeting via the Zoom webcast will need to click on the raise hand icon to inform the meeting moderator that they would like to speak on the item. The meeting moderator will notify the individual when it is their turn to speak by calling their Zoom ID. Please remember that the Zoom ID is the name used when logging into the meeting. At that time, the individual will be prompted to unmute their microphone and will be able to share their comment. Individuals who join the meeting via the US toll-free number will need to press *9 on their phone to inform the meeting moderator that they would like to speak on the item. The meeting moderator will notify the individual when it is their turn to speak by calling out the last 4 digits of their phone number and will allow them to unmute their telephone. At that time, the individual will be prompted to press *6 and will be able to share their comment. Item 5A is the Division of Professional Practices Workload Report. Gil Gonzalez will present this item. Mr. Gonzalez, will you please begin?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Gil Gonzalez, Director of DPP, and I'll be presenting item 5A, the DPP Workload Report, an informational item. To increase its oversight of the work of the Division of Professional Practices, in 2011, the Commission on Teacher Credentialing directed staff to present information about DPP's workload as part of the Commission's agenda. These are highlights from the December 2021 statistics. The Commission's dashboard reports on 6 key measurements in line graph form, showing both current year numbers as well as prior numbers for comparison purposes. The total cases are the number of open cases within DPP, including cases in the intake unit before the Committee of Credentials, pending before the Commission, and pending an administrative hearing. At the end of December, the caseload was 2,438 cases and below the normal range of 2,600 to 2,800 cases, which was pre-COVID. Cases open are new cases received during the month from all sources, including criminal arrest notices, district reports, affidavits, and educators who self-report misconduct. Following the COVID-19 closures in March 2020, DPP received fewer reports of misconduct, which resulted in fewer cases being open. As expected, and schools reopened, staff began to open more cases due to the increased number of applications received. In December, staff opened 541 cases, which is above the normal range of 400 to 500 cases open per month. The initial and formal review charts reflect the number of cases reviewed by the committee at its normal 3-day meeting in December. The 2-step process is required by statute. The Commission reviewed fewer initial review cases in the past few months, again, due to the overall decline of the DPP caseload. Staff expects initial review cases to return to normal levels, which was at 90 in the near future once cases return to normal levels. Cases closed is the number of matters closed by the Commission action, committee action, or closed by staff where the Commission has given formal delegation of authority. In December, 323 cases were closed, which is below the normal range. of 400 to 500 cases. AG cases refer to cases in which an educator requests an administrative hearing to challenge the recommendation for discipline made by the committee. An administrative hearing is an evidentiary proceeding where an administrative law judge hears and rules on the evidence. The commission is represented by in these hearings by the Office of Attorney General. We currently have 163 cases assigned to the AG's office. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. We will now open for public comment. If there are members of the public that would like to give a presentation, please notify the meeting moderator by clicking on the raise hand icon if participating through Zoom, or pressing *9 if participating by phone. Recording secretary, are there any public comments?
We do not have any public comments on this item.
Okay, thank you. The public comment period for this item is now closed. Do commissioners have any questions or comments on this item? I am looking for raised hands and I do not see any, but I have a question, and please raise your hand if you have any questions during that time. Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. I appreciate the work that is put into this very important agenda item that comes up with each meeting. Please don't take our lack of questions as any indication of how important we know that this work is, which is one way for the public to see the incredibly important disciplinary work that is conducted by the commission and by the commission staff. I have one question for you, and it's similar to questions I've asked at other times, but I feel it's important to check in each time. I noticed that from November to December, there was a pretty big jump in the total case numbers from 2,220 to 2,438, and also the cases opened from 360 to 541. Now, you noted in your report, in your oral report, that this was expected, and we do note that 541 cases open is above the normal range. And you noted that this is expected due to maybe some backlog of cases from during the pandemic that would be reported now, or perhaps also from school openings. I want to check in to see if you have any concerns about this increased caseload for the division to be carrying, and also just to inquire, do you think that this will be sort of a wave that will last for a certain amount of time and then recede back into the normal range, or what are your expectations? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. During the last 6 months, we've had an influx of applications that have come in, and mostly due to first-time applicants. So we've been opening more cases during the last 6 months. How long that lasts, not sure. But we've been, the 2438 is still below the normal 26 to 2,800 cases. And we've handled up to 2,900 cases at one time. I think that's still manageable as we are now. Part of that 541 that we opened in December was a little bit of a lag for November. We've had some staffing issues. We've had some vacant positions in the intake unit, but again, it's not going to be a problem that'll continue.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate that reassurance, and we rely on your reporting to let us know if there are staffing shortages or any other reason why there might be any delays that would come up. I see that there are not delays now, but we appreciate that very much. Well, I do not see any other hands, so I just want to again offer my thanks not only to Mr. Gonzalez and his division, but also to the Committee on Credentials for their excellent work facilitating our disciplinary work. This is an information item and no action is needed. Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. This concludes the business before the Professional Practices Committee. The committee is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hartwig, and thank you, Gil. Maybe someday we'll put you first on the agenda. See if that's up. All right. I'd like to reconvene the general session and move to item 1H, new business, the bi-monthly agenda is presented for information. Recording secretary, are there any audience presentations?
We have no audience presentations.
All right. Well, with that, then I will now recess the general session. Members of the commission will go into closed session. The general session will reconvene after the closed session. Commissioners, we have instructions for entering closed session. It is currently 1:41. Can we get into closed session at 1:50? Okay, let's reconvene the general session and move to agenda item 1I. Report. The L's and the I's look the same to me here. Report of closed session items. Vice Chair Marisol Escobedo. Oh my goodness, it's been a long couple of days. Marisol, would you please read the closed session report?
Yes, it is Friday. Okay. Closed session items, February 10/11/2022. The commission granted the following petitions for reinstatement: Wendy Estrada Fernandez and Gregory Shields. The commission denied the following petitions for reinstatement: Benjamin Lanier, John Nguyen, Michael Pham, Arturo Rodriguez, Tim Talboy, and Isku Chachian. Staff briefed the commission on the case of California Commission on Teacher Credentialing versus Arcadia Unified School District, and no reportable action was taken. The commission proceeded with a default decision and order in the matter of Joey Diaz. The commission adopted the decision and order in the matter of Samuel Kwaku Agye Fosu Godman and Shauna Berlin. The commission reviewed the transcript in the matter of Paul Stein and Mauricio Zelaya. A decision and order will be prepared for the commission's adoption. The commission ordered a 30-day delay for preparation of the decision and order. The commission rejected the proposed decision in the following matters and called for the transcripts: Griselda Jauregui, Liam McConville, Rebecca Paris, Lupe Perez, Mary Pierce. The commission adopted the proposed decision in the matter of Michael Cullen. Commissioner Susan Heredia recused herself on this item. The commission voted to make a technical correction to and adopt the petition to revoke probation in the matter of Randy Davila. The commission discussed consent calendar item number 37, Aaron Harkey, and accepted the recommendation of the Committee of Credentials. The commission discussed the following consent calendar items and remanded the matters back to the Committee of Credentials. Number 6, Stephanie Baker. Number 58, Ramon Mora. And that concludes the closed session items.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And with that, commissioners, thank you for your service over the last 2 very long days. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Thank you, staff. Thank you, Mary. And I will now adjourn the February 2022 meeting of the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. The next meeting is on April 7th and 8th, 2022. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.